Hello, I'm Emily Abbott Brown, and I'm here with Conrad Askland, composer of Pan the Musical. So Pan was your second full-length musical?
Pan was my second full-length musical in 2013. My first full-length musical was in 2012, Witches, the story of the Salem witch trials. My third full-length musical was Romeo and Juliet in 2015, and my fourth full-length original musical was in 2019, and it was called Pray the Gay Away, a story about the painful world of gay conversion therapy.
So you wrote the book, the lyrics, the music, as well as the orchestration for Pan?
The whole musical is based on the original novel, the original book by J.M. Barrie called Peter and Wendy. So I took that as source material and then created new lyrics and wrote music to a story and then orchestrated it for the pit orchestra to play in live performance.
Pan is based on J.M. Barrie's Peter and Wendy, and although you do use parts of the original text, you edit it down quite a bit. How did you decide which parts of the text to use, and did you do all these edits yourself?
I did do all the edits myself. I selected parts that I thought were expectations of the audience to see on stage, and also the parts that I thought were interesting. One thing that's always interested me about writing and creating musicals, and I guess this would apply to novels as well, is, 10 artists can read the same source material, but the elements they gravitate towards are going to be very different, and that's part of what is that artist's style. So there were certain things as I read the story that I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I'll give you one example. In the straight play Peter Pan, and in the book Peter and Wendy, Wendy wants, before she goes to Neverland, Wendy wants to go to a party with her parents, and the father won't let her, because she's not an adult yet. And then they just move on, and that really interested me. So I wrote a whole song there called Just a Little Girl, which is one of my personal favorite moments in the show. So that's just an example of a moment that really resonated with me where I said, oh, let's stop and explore this, whereas someone else reading the same source material might have entirely different moments and situations that moved them to explore.
So there are so many versions of Peter Pan out there. Why did you choose to write Pan the Musical?
You're right. There are too many Peter Pan plays and musicals out there. The reason I decided to write this is because a friend had told me that a local community theater group was getting ready to shut its doors because of their finances. This was back in early 2013. So I immediately had the idea within seconds, Pan. Write Peter Pan so that it can be well attended, sell a lot of tickets, and get this group back on its feet. The whole premise of that was really risky. You're in financial trouble from putting on shows, so your answer is to put on a show. And we cut a lot of heat before the show opened, but it worked. When we did the run of Pan, it was very well attended, and this theater group got back on their feet, and I'm happy to say that in 2021, they are still alive and kicking.
That's fantastic. I've heard that you count the number of standing ovations at your shows. How many standing ovations did Pan receive, and what was the overall audience response at the 2013 premiere run?
So Pan had a run of 10 shows, and out of those shows, it got 7 standing ovations. It is still probably my most well-received musical. It's my only family-friendly musical. And families loved watching this with their children. Grandparents and parents would bring their children to this show. So it was a real cathartic family community event to watch this show.
What time period is Pan set in?
Pan is in the Edwardian period. Edwardian period is generally around 1901 to 1910. So you could think around 1910. What's wonderful about this period of time is industrialism had hit, but there hadn't been the First World War yet. So there was a kind of an innocence. The fight for women's rights hadn't really started yet. So there is a very misogynistic element, looking back to that period of time. Definite emphasis on patriarchy, which I also play up in Pan to highlight Wendy's struggle to really identify herself and gain respect.
Since Pan is set in the Edwardian period, how did this affect your approach to the music? Is the music also Edwardian style?
The music, I would say, is very golden age musical theater. I always think of, Mary Poppins, I think, is in general in that time period. It's a time period that could go steampunk. It did in the way that I wasn't looking to reinvent the world of Peter Pan. I very much wanted to immerse myself in the world of the original Peter Pan and then look around from in that world, which elements are interesting to explore. So the music, there is one kind of punkish rock song that the Lost Boys sing when they first come out, but it is very traditional music, very proper music, and I think in general what's expected for a traditional musical theater piece.
How long did it take you to write Pan the musical, and how did you find the time to write it?
If I had all the time in the world to write it, it would have taken 10 years, but it took 6 months because remember, I was writing this for a group to put them back on their feet financially. So we had a short turnaround. I pitched the idea in March. It was immediately approved, and we set dates for September. So the dates were set before I had even started writing it. And then I was on the road while writing a lot of it too, until we started rehearsals and did auditions and brought it to the stage. So very quick, out of necessity.
Okay, you say you were on the road. Is it true that you wrote most of Pan while at sea?
I was doing some cruise ship gigs, and at this particular time, I think I was playing with Royal Caribbean. So I wrote the pirate themes while I was actually at sea, which was a lot of fun to write pirate music while I was on the high seas.
What would you say was your biggest difficulty in writing Pan?
At first, it was to figure out what it was going to be. I thought, okay, is this going to be, a modern rendition? Is it going to be all about Wendy, a rock musical? Is it going to be classical? And I had a lunch with the executive director of this performing arts group at the time, and she said to me, why don't you just start writing and let it be what it is? And I still think that was such profound advice. And I did just that. I went home and started writing it. And of course, the expression of the story is always going to come from, our backgrounds, our tastes, our experience. We can try to sound like someone else, but we're always going to end up sounding like ourselves because you can't fully imitate someone. So I would say the difficulty at the beginning was deciding what it was. And once I had that insight, it is what it is, then the show was very, very, very fast to create.
You made some changes to the original J.M. Barrie story, one of which is the death of Tinkerbell. What was that change and why did you decide to make it?
So spoiler alert right here. I did make a change in Tinkerbell. I had helped with sound effects on a 2007 production of the straight play of Peter Pan. And one part that bothered me is the part where Hook leaves poison to trick Pan so he can kill Peter Pan. Tinkerbell drinks the poison to save Peter Pan. Tinkerbell starts to die, and then Peter Pan goes to the audience, the famous scene, "If you believe in fairies, clap your hands, clap your hands." The parents all looked at the children and said, "Come on, clap your hands." Tinkerbell comes back to life. What I didn't like about that moment is the conceit of the parents, oh, we know what's going to happen, you just clap your hands. And I thought, is that really enough? I know it's Peter Pan, it's a children's play, but is that enough? Are they really believing in just clapping their hands? So in my version, when they go to clap their hands, Tinkerbell does not come back to life. She dies. And I remember before the show opened, I was getting a lot of heat from this for the production team, that this was going to be so devastating and unenjoyable for the audience. I really stuck to my guns on that because I really thought it was important. There was a learning lesson in here that it's not just clapping your hands, you have to truly believe. So at that moment, when Tinkerbell dies, the parents have a joint experience and adventure with the children, what's going to happen. And I'm happy to say, the end of the story, it doesn't stop there with Tinkerbell. There's a very satisfying ending for audiences that happens later. That moment, I think, was very important for parents to learn along with their children, and I think it's a small way of experiencing the Peter Pan story anew.
Another change you made to the original J.M. Barrie story is when Peter Pan defeats Captain Hook. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so like I said, in Act 1, I focused on Wendy where she wanted to go to the party with the parents. And I thought, well, where's that coming from? What does that feel like? So we explored Wendy kind of wanting to step into her own. And I think most of us understand that, Wendy going to Neverland is her, emerging out of adolescence, becoming an adult, trying to, the start of finding her own path. What bothered me is the end of the original Peter Pan, Wendy just stands there while Peter Pan defeats Hook. And I thought, what a horrible lesson. Peter Pan, I don't know, supposedly hasn't worked for these skills, was just born with them, had them, so he didn't have anything on the line. I thought, no, Wendy needs to defeat Captain Hook. She needs to be the one to do this, to show her hero's journey. And like in Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker is going to destroy the Death Star and he takes off the visor and uses the Force, I knew that Wendy had to defeat Captain Hook, not through a trick or magic, but through her cunning, by using her skill sets. And I won't spoil how she does that, but it ties in to the first act part of her, using one of her skill sets and her brain to defeat Captain Hook. And I think that's a beautiful improvement to the Peter Pan story.
I love that. You've told me 2 songs have a special place in your heart. One is Just a Little Girl. Would you mind telling us about that?
So Just a Little Girl is the song that Wendy sings after she asks her father, oh, can I go to the party with you? And he doesn't just say no. He says, no, you're just a little girl. And I just get a shiver saying those words because it's very pejorative, not only of youth, but also very misogynistic. And I wanted to show that Wendy had something to really fight back against. So her song is, what does she say? It's easy to be small when no one notices you're there, when you're just a little girl. Through this song, she emerges to make a stand and basically say, no, I'm going to be something. I'm going to make something of myself. I don't know how yet, because that's the journey of the Peter Pan story. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to break free of this.
The other song special to you is One Away. Tell us about that song.
One Away is in Act 2. It's what Tiger Lily sings to the Lost Boys. Another part of the Peter Pan story that I thought was very unfulfilling is Princess Tiger Lily's role. She basically just comes out and says, my tribe will save you, and they defeat the pirates. And I thought, well, if she's the princess of a tribe, wouldn't she have some knowledge to share with us, some wisdom? So one way is her sharing wisdom with Wendy on her journey. The wisdom is, when you have a dream, you never know how close you are. Not all of your dreams come true, but the next one might. You might just be one dream away of your dreams coming true. And of course, this is also a very important lesson for the audience too, and an important lesson for the parents to share with their children. Now, this isn't given as a lecture. It's a very beautiful melody, and it's done with hand shadow puppets behind her as she's singing. It was, I think, the singular, most important moment of the entire musical for parents and grandparents to share with their children.
A few years ago, you decided to earn your master's degree, and Pan had a part in choosing that career path?
It did. So, like I said, this community theater group was in financial trouble, and my answer at the time was to write a show which got them back on their feet, which it did. But I remember at the time thinking, isn't there something else I could do? Wouldn't it be cool if I could say, okay, guys, let's look at your financials. Let's open up your books, your mission statements. Let's see what's going on here and see how we can fix things. So my master's degree was actually to learn more about the business side of the development of nonprofit arts organizations. The technical master's degree I got was from Colorado State University, and it's in arts leadership and cultural management.
I would love to know, what is the process of your music composition? Like, how did you go about creating the music?
So most of it is writing to the title, and then of course, the exciting part of that journey is then exploring the things that you want to express within the time you have on that subject matter.
And you also orchestrated the score. How did you decide which instruments to use?
You have some practicalities. For instance, you're going to have keyboard one, which I usually work as a keyboard one and conductor. You're going to have a keyboard two. You're going to have drums. So then what other colors do you want in there? I brought in a tuba, which I thought was very fun to do for that kind of time period, around 1910, and also very fun with the pirates. The reorchestration that is replaced by a trombone, because you can get many more different tonal colors for musical theater with a trombone. I went with a clarinet, so we did some kind of Dixieland fun pieces, and then also get the darkness of the bass clarinet in the orchestration. Had an oboe. I had a little bit of a mysterious Mid-Eastern kind of feel in some of the music.
So then how did the orchestration affect your composition approach?
In some of my other musicals, the orchestration does affect the writing. Romeo and Juliet in particular, because it was very advanced orchestration. For Pan, I wrote most of the melodies on piano and then orchestrated afterwards. So the orchestration didn't have a large effect on the music.
This show was done on a shoestring budget, and yet audiences expect the Darling children and Peter Pan to fly. How did you work around that?
You're right. My expectation was that audience members expect Peter Pan and the Darling children to fly. I did the 2007 play version, and in that production they had a $10,000 budget to rent a rigging system from Las Vegas so that the children could fly along with Peter Pan. This show, we didn't have that kind of budget. What we did, there was a family member of someone on the production team who was an engineer, and he designed what we call these flying boxes. And imagine a wooden box that has a pole on the back of it that the children are strapped into, and a handle on the back. The box is on casters, so a stage person behind can roll these boxes around. We used these flying boxes along with some stage fog and had the parents roll the children around the stage. As cheesy as that sounds, audience members loved it and they totally bought into it. We didn't get a single complaint. It was a really fun moment. And in a smaller theater, maybe a theater that's 500 seats or less, I actually think if someone's going to do Pan the musical, they should do an approach like that. I thought it was more endearing than doing the full rigging and flying.
What were your favorite songs in the musical?
I really enjoyed the opening number, Happy Darling Family. And part of the reason is it reminds me a little of the Jetsons, where you have this perfect happy family, but in the intro I'm showing how they're not perfect. The brothers don't really like the sister so much. The sister doesn't really care for the brothers. Mr. Darling is very misogynistic and a little egotistical. Mrs. Darling is just trying to keep the peace. We show all that in the opening song. I like the melody, Straight On Till Morning, when the kids go to Neverland. And Children, You Can Be a Pirate, the song that the pirates sing, along with the little Broadway-style chorus line, I think is really, really fun.
What kind of audience attended this show?
This was a family musical. Grandparents taking their grandchildren, parents taking their children. This was families that wanted to have a joint experience with multiple generations. And one thing I feel very satisfied about is one of the earlier reviews of the show said that I didn't write a children's musical. I wrote a musical that children and parents can both like at the same time. There is just a touch of highbrow musical theater in the show, but not enough that's going to bore kids. So very, very family oriented.
Since you performed this show with a community theater group, do you think another community theater group could easily put on Pan?
Pan was written specifically for community theater groups to perform, so absolutely, yes. There are roles for youth that don't have a lot of acting or singing training. The Lost Boys group. There are roles that are a little bit more demanding for acting and singing, like in the case of Tiger Lily and Wendy. Mrs. Darling is almost an operatic mezzo part for a very trained singer. Mr. Darling is a very adult musical theater type role. The Pirates can be a mix of adults and children at different experience levels. So yes, this is something for a full range of different generations and different experience backgrounds to join together in producing a show that audiences just love to see.
Speaking of coming together to put on a show, you had a cast of over 30 actors and singers, not to mention the orchestra. What does it take to put on a show of that size?
When I do an original musical, I totally clear out my schedule for a full 5 months before the show opens so that I have, 12 to 14 hours a day to devote to just supporting the musical so it can be the best that it can be when it hits opening night.
Sounds like in self-producing musicals you wear a lot of hats. You've mentioned you listen to the motto, "Don't listen to the hype." How does that affect your production approach?
So when you're working on a show, of course, you always want to get buzz going. You always want to get some hype. Oh, there's a new musical coming to town. What's it about? And in that excitement, you still have to be, really keeping your nose to the grindstone at rehearsals, getting the most you can out of your casts, using your rehearsal time well. So I look at, the hype and the buzz is all exterior. That's preparing future audiences to see your show. You can't let that creep into your inner circle, your cast and production team. You need to stay focused on bringing the best show to the stage. And the reason that's so important is I've seen people fall prey to that with disastrous results, where they fell into the hype, oh, everything's awesome, didn't use the time the best they could, and then things fell short on opening night. If you're going to fall short on opening night, it shouldn't be because you didn't put your best foot forward. Always want to bring the best product you can to stage and then let audiences judge that work.
Conrad, what have you been working on since the premiere of Pan in 2013?
Pan was late 2013. I went right from there to working for Rock of Ages as our music director and keyboardist with Norwegian Cruise Line. We did runs from New York to Bermuda and down to the Virgin Islands. And while doing that, I finished up a professional certificate in Ableton Live with Berklee College of Music, and then completed a bachelor's degree with Berklee College of Music. Brought my third original musical, Romeo and Juliet, to the stage in 2015. Then was music director and keyboardist for the world tour of Verikai by Cirque du Soleil. Worked on a few local community theater shows in between there. Finished up my master's degree from Colorado State in arts leadership and cultural management. And then brought my fourth original musical to the stage in late 2019 called Pray the Gay Away. And then, of course, COVID hit.
Yes, it did. So you first brought Pan to the stage in 2013, but now you're about to release the entire show video in 2021. Why now?
I'm hoping it reaches a wider audience. More people can enjoy this, grandparents and parents with their children. And also hoping that other community theater groups get a chance to get a feel for this show and consider whether they want to add it to their lineup. This show helped a youth community theater group get back on its feet financially, so I'm very confident it can do that same thing for other theater groups.
So you mentioned Pan was scheduled to return to the stage in 2020. When Pan returns to the stage, are you planning on making any changes to the script or the music?
Very small changes. I do want to reorchestrate it, give it a little more punch, a little more of a Broadway sound. But as far as the script and the music, it's very surgical changes. A couple lyric lines here and there, adding a descant to a song. Very few changes. The show really worked, the timing worked, and really landed with audiences.
So Conrad, when Pan is released, where can we watch it?
Pan the Musical will be released on my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, type in Conrad Askland. If you're watching this interview, you're probably already on my channel. Go down to my main page where it says Original Musicals by Conrad Askland, and Pan the Musical will be there to watch, along with other musicals that I've done. I really hope you enjoy watching this family-friendly musical.
Well, thank you so much, Conrad, for your time and insight, and I look forward to watching the show.
Children, you can be a pirate, sail the seven seas. Find the treasure, steal the booty, eat the rotten cheese. Swab the deck, yell yo-ho, and kick it around a smee. And you can be a pirate just like me.